Good evening, my friends. Would you like to hear a story? Our tale today is another spooky tale. The kind, well, the kind that rests right outside your door. This tale is called Knocking. It started when I was 6 years old. I was in school, it was the middle of a reading lesson, and I needed to pee. At that age, actually, a fair few kids still wet themselves, and I always got paranoid about embarrassing myself in public like that. I stuck my hand up and told Mrs. Debbie that I needed to use the bathroom. After the usual speech about how I should have gone at break, she gave me the key to the disabled access toilet, as it was the closest one to my classroom. It was the middle of fifth period, and the corridors were empty and seemed cavernous to me. I was short, scrawny thing back then, and I sometimes had trouble with doors, especially unlocking them. And I fumbled for a good minute or two in trying to get the blasted thing open. Anyway, as I sat on my porcelain throne, there came a knocking at the door. "Someone's in here," I called, disgruntled at the disturbance. There came a pause. Then the knocking resumed. It was faster now, more determined. "Wait a minute." The knocking slowed, and a voice said, "Let me in. I need to come inside." The speaker's tone was thin and reedy, an adult I didn't recognize. I may have been 6, but I also had a fairly good understanding of bathroom etiquette, mainly that you didn't let more than one person in an area only slightly larger than a cupboard. "Go away!" The knocking intensified again, until it was a frantic drumbeat, just a few feet from me and out of sight. I heard the voice shouting something, growing more and more desperate. "Let me in. Just open the door, please!" I was terrified by that point. The hammering and yelling was so loud, and yet nobody had come to investigate it. Eventually, my teacher came to find me angry because I had been gone for almost half an hour. When I refused to open the door and let her in, she got the spare key from the receptionist and then took me to the headmaster's office and called my parents. I was suspended for the rest of the week, and I never told anyone what happened. It was a few weeks before my next encounter with this phenomenon. I had celebrated my 7th birthday, and my family were having a barbecue at our house in my honor. It was a glorious sunny day, but as soon as we'd set everything out and set up the allotments behind our house, the coal refused to light. My dad asked me to go and get some fire starters from the shed in front of the garden. It was pretty cramped inside, and I wouldn't fit all the way, so I just opened it up and stood on my toes and reached the shelf holding my objective. Then shut the door. As I turned away, a frantic knocking hit the other side of the door. "Open up! I need to come through!" This voice was not the one I'd heard the month before. It was deeper, more brooding, and angry. I said nothing and hurried away. I had no idea what was happening, but it frightened me. As I walked away, there came a final thump, like a fist being slammed against wood, and I heard the voice again. "You little bastard! I'll rip your fucking teeth out! Let me through!" I ran back to my party and spent the rest of the day glancing over my shoulder. As you might have guessed by now, there were a lot of these voices. I count at least 30 total. And every month or so, I used to get them, pleading to be let through doors. Almost always, it would be immediately after I'd shut the door behind me. As though these strange entities had been following me, I never told anyone, but to be honest, I kind of just got used to it. It always made me jump, and some of the voices would make me feel uneasy, but I knew I was safe as long as I did not open the door. Some of the voices I got used to, and to an extent that I even named them. There was one which always used to appear at my front door at home. We have frosted glass, and I could see a silhouetted, average-sized man wearing a cap of some kind. He never spoke, but occasionally would push envelopes containing blank pieces of paper through the letterbox. I called him the postman. He was one of the most unsettling ones. If I tried to speak to him, he would look up, then simply and sharply began knocking. I generally left the postman alone. 20 years on, and I have retained as much normality as possible. I have plenty of friends, and I even have an on-off relationship with a girl I met last year. Not bad for a guy who wakes up in the middle of the night and listens intently to noises you can't hear on the other side of the door. Yeah, my buddies think I'm strange and kooky, but they put up with it. They're all great. I miss them. You see, things have started to get strange. Well, stranger than usual. I suppose 3 weeks ago I awoke sweating and crying, though I do not know why. My dream had been, from what I recall, fairly normal, when a huge shadow had abruptly fallen over everything. Literally, the second I opened my eyes, there came a knocking on my bedroom door. Not just normal knocking, though. This was truly frantic. "Who goes there?" I yelled. "Please help us," it replied. I was surprised. It was the sadistic, angry voice that I had remembered from my father's shed on my 7th birthday, but it seemed genuinely sincere. There was a pained tone to it, too, as though the speaker had been grievously wounded. I actually found myself pulling back the sheets to get up, but I hesitated. I had never been tempted to open the door. I suppose, as a child, I had rigorously drummed in my head the idea that whatever lay beyond was evil, and it was just common sense to leave the doors shut. To be quite honest, I came very close to letting the thing into my room. That morning, I held out. In the end. It got worse. Just 2 days later, I was at my local corner shop. I'd just paid for a bottle of milk and a newspaper when a great force slammed against the shop door. Simultaneously, a voice began screaming, a long, keening squeal of pain. I whirled to face the door, but there were so many flyers plastered over the glass that I could only just make out the shape of a woman on the other side, slapping her palms against the window. The shopkeeper stared at me as though I were crazy. In the end, I asked if he had a bathroom I could use, murmured some half-thought-out excuse, and hid there 10 minutes. Until the screaming stopped. There were 4 more incidents between then and now, a mixture of screams and tearful begging. The postman stopped by yesterday too. He knocked politely before sliding through his usual letter through the letterbox. Then another, then another. A total of 10 plain brown envelopes. The postman waited for a few minutes, knocking occasionally, then he left me alone. Each letter contained a sheet of A4 paper, but somebody had taken a black pen to the pages, scribbling and shading them with such vigour that there were large tears around the centre, and the edges were frayed. I shoved them back into their envelopes and tried to put it from my mind. Earlier, my bedroom door shook violently. It wasn't a scream or a howl or a roar that I heard, though it was just crying. Dozens and dozens of voices, sobbing quietly. Another blow struck my door. Plaster flaked from the walls and twirled to the carpet. No pleas or bargaining, just sobbing.
What do you want? I'll give you anything. It's coming.
I jumped up from my chair. A hairline crack split the frame of the door in one corner. My phone began to ring and I heard a sharp rapping at the glass of my window from behind the curtains. I tried answering the phone, but it was simply yet more voices crying. Not even sobbing, though. More like bawling in terror and anguish. I hung up, but it just kept ringing, so I took the battery out. I have shoved most of my furniture against the door and window. It has been 3 hours since the latest attempt at entry began. The battering was not abated, nor has the crying. I'm fairly sure that my door won't hold much longer. As for my mediocre barricade, it could be swept aside in 2 minutes. I find myself faced with a very real possibility of death. So I am writing this memoir of sorts, just in case something does happen. What do they want? Do they even want to hurt me? They seemed fearless, even malicious before. What could have driven them to this? Maybe I should open the door. Maybe I should let them in. Silence fell. I realized that even the crying had ceased. For a whole minute I sat there. Then I got up and hurried to my door, eager to escape this claustrophobic situation. Perhaps I'd go outside, where I could be far away from any doors and from the damned knocking. I pulled away my barricade and turned the handle. Locked. Kneeling, I peered through the keyhole. Beyond my bedroom door was not the corridor that I remembered, but another room. Some kind of library or classroom, I think. It was unoccupied, save for one kid, sitting and reading with his back to me. I banged on the door. "Hey kid, let me out, okay?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Yeah, over here. Could you open the door, please?" I can't. I'm in detention. I'm not supposed to talk to anyone. Go away." He turned from me, confused and exasperated. I began to stand up. A loud bang shattered the silence once more. I realized it sounded like a fist being pounded against glass. My window. I heard it again. But this was not the frantic knocking of somebody wanting to get inside. It was not even an attempt to break in. Whatever was beyond the curtain and glass knew I was inside. It knew I was frightened. It was most predatory and sadistic in all ways possible. It wanted me to be afraid. I turned back to the door and began hammering on it frantically. "Hey, let me in, okay? I really need you to open the door." That is the end of the story for today, my friends. Don't be afraid to open the doors. And don't be afraid to check out all of the other stories that we'll be telling all the time here in my little corner. Good Good night, my friends.